Hello and Assalamu alaikum. This tutorial is about family counseling. Family counseling is a vast and diverse topic due to which this topic will be covered in multiple parts that you may find on my YouTube channel. In order to understand family counseling, there are a few concepts which are important to understand. And the important concepts include non-summativity, which indicates that family is greater than sum of its parts, which means that whole is greater than sum of its parts. So it's necessary to examine the patterns within the family rather than the actions of any specific member alone because it's a unit and one influences the other. Another concept is equifinality. That means that the same origin may lead to different outcomes, which means that sometimes um, a trauma is experienced by a family, and the members of that family or that family as a whole unit becomes weaker and they get distant from each other. However, there is another family who experiences same kind of trauma, but rather than getting distant from each other, they become more stronger and more closer to each other. So it depends that whether it is a healthy family or a dysfunctional family, that how would it be coping with the problem that emerges in their life or in their family. And when we talk about the treatment focus, the interactional family patterns and the particular conditions and events are very much significant. So the counselor has to focus on all these patterns and conditions. Another concept is communication, and all kind of behavior is said to be communicative, and there are two functions of the interpersonal messages. The first part is the content, which is the factual information that is sent to other way, and relationship, that how the message is to be understood within the family or by the other family members, and what is in fact uh, what sort of message is conveyed by how it is delivered, that what is the tone or what is uh, the communication style or what process is being used, that sometimes communication is not direct, the communication is indirect, or there are mediators who are used in order to communicate information from one family member to another. Similarly, there are family rules to be understood that defines that what sort of functioning the family would be having. There is a pattern known as redundancy principle, and many families actually operate on such kind of rules. To help the families change, it is very much important to change the dysfunctionality of the ways in which their families are working or whatever are their boundaries. The family counselors can help them to understand the rules which the probably the other family members are unable to understand, or help them modify those kind of rules through which the family is actually operating. Morphogenesis. Morphogenesis is another aspect which is important to understand. It is the usual requirement that a second order of change is required. That is the ability to make an entirely new response rather than the first order change. And what is the first order change is it is continuing to do more of the same things that have worked previously. So the first order change has to be modified so that there will be a second order of change, so entirely the previous responses are replaced with the new responses. Another thing is homeostasis, like biological organisms. The families also have a tendency to remain steady. So there are changes that are brought in order to balance the family through the actions of the family members. The members of the family quickly try to rectify the situation through the positive or negative feedback. And this, the model of functioning can be compared to a furnace which comes on when a house falls below a set temperature and cuts off once the temperature is reached. Olson developed his model for understanding the family systems, which is known as Circumplex Model of Marital and Family Systems. All the families have to deal with family cohesion, that is, how strong or how connectively the family is, what kind of bonding is present among the family members, and family adaptability, that is, to what extent the family members are flexible. The two dimensions of family cohesion and family adaptability have four levels. The two dimensions are curvilinear in that the families that apparently are very high or very low on both dimensions seem dysfunctional, whereas families that are balanced seem to function more adequately. We can see that in the figure number one that is describing the circumplex model over here. And for example, a family that is high in cohesion is enmeshed, which means that they are to some extent, we can say that they are so much close to each other that their boundaries are completely blurred and they are unable to differentiate themselves from each other. If the same family is also high in adaptability, they will also be chaotic and disorganized. This combination results in a family that is chaotically unmeshed, which means that they are very much close, but they are not able to function appropriately. And as a result, that is an unbalanced family. So, when we make utilization of circumplex model in order to understand the family functioning, it becomes very much helpful for us to understand because even the most dysfunctional families, they have these features, and even those that are the functional families they will be uh, reflecting a few aspects regarding that, how flexible they are, how chaotic they are, how structured they are, and how rigid they are. Boolean family system theory is often used in order to understand the functioning of the family. It's a theory of human behavior that views the family as an emotional unit and uses systems thinking to describe the complex interactions in the unit of the family. It is the nature of a family that its members are intensely connected. This theory was basically developed by Murray Bowen in 1975 at the Georgetown Family Center. There are eight interlocking concepts in that which are important to understand. Nuclear family emotional system is basically focusing on the dysfunction of a partner. When there is a dysfunction in a partner, it can take a number of forms, including the physical or emotional or social dysfunction, and can include some sort of issues like substance abuse or acting out behaviors. The other partner is often unaware of the problem and becomes stronger as the other experiences dysfunction. And there is couple conflict that may emerge, and sometimes this conflict is projected to one or more children at times. Similarly, another aspect that we see is the differentiation of self. When we talk about the differentiation of self, it is important to understand that members of the healthy family can differentiate between own thoughts and feelings, as he sports or states, and those of the others. The opposite of the differentiation is actually fusion. The greater the fusion between the individual members, the poorer there will be the functioning, which means that those who are unable to differentiate themselves are unable to distinguish between the intellectual process and the feeling process. The third content or the third point is the triangles. When you talk about the triangles, it is the two members experience stress and it is brought in another family member to relieve the tension. That is, the tension is not handled by the two people, and in order to manage it or in order to balance it, a third member of the family is involved. And when that third person is involved between the conflict of the two people, it is called a triangle. During the intense stress, the triangle gets bigger and will bring the interlocking relationship with the other triangles. When anxiety increases, people um, need increased closeness, or that is fusion, or they might be requiring some kind of distance. So, in order to manage anxiety, the triangles are formed. The next concept is family projection. When there is a triangle that is formed, it is evident that the family projection process would also come into play, where the parents in the nuclear family focus anxiety on a child and the child develops the problems. The parents then usually attempt to get the child to change or ask an expert to fix the child. That is, they do not consider that the problem lies with them. They project it onto the child that the problem lies with the child. The experienced Bowen family system consultants or counselors report that when parents can instead manage their own anxiety and resolve their own relationship issues, the functioning of the child automatically improves. Cutoff, that is specifically we call it emotional cutoff. It is an extreme distancing that constitutes the concept of emotional cutoff, where the family members discontinue the emotional contact with each other. So, when you hear that, you can understand that there is dysfunctioning that is emerging, that emotionally they have lost the contact. This has significant implications for the functioning of the future generations, as the emotional family unit is served in such a way that the anxiety has fewer places to be absorbed in the extended family, and the anxiety becomes the chronic anxiety, and people tend to look for other relationships in order to substitute the cut-off relationships, and these new relationships that are formed, they are intensified, and people actually become vulnerable for the development of different symptoms which are related to mental health problems. Multi-generational transmission process, it is actually the differentiation of self or the fusion is transmitted through the multi-generational process. As it is said that the theory is multi-generational, so it actually describes the pattern of emotional process through the multiple generations, that there is a parent who has learned something from his parent and is practicing all that, and then he or she is transmitting all that anxiety or handling the problems to the child. So actually it offers a way of thinking about the family patterns that go beyond a dichotomy of the genes versus the environment. That is, the family patterns are transmitted across the generations, and there are multiple triangles that are formed. The next concept is sibling position. When we talk about sibling position, that is basically the concept of domain that has been taken. It affects variation in basic and functional levels of differentiation as well. Oldest, youngest, middle children, they tend towards certain functional roles in the family. Like the youngest one is the most pampered one. the oldest one is considered to be the most responsible one. So the placing or the position in the family or in the siblings is influenced by the particular mix of the sibling position of the parent as well and the other relative which are living in the family. The eighth is social emotional process, which is the last concept, and it refers to a tendency of people within the society to be more anxious because there are changes that are emerging in the society. There are so many problems in the society, and societal changes are being brought. There is news that we receive from the society. There are people in the society, and whatever is happening in the society that influences on the individual, like for example environmental stressors like overpopulation, unemployment, scarcity of the natural resources, epidemics, like these days we are having pandemic issues, lockdowns are there. So they eventually have an influence or they contribute to the regression in the society, and eventually it has an influence onto the personality of the individual. I hope it's clear. In family counseling, generally the role of the counselor is to teach the client to be more aware regarding the cognitions and how the individual is behaving with the other people. Just like the Socratic questioning in CBT, until the client gets to know about that what is the problem, gets an insight as well as starts thinking for himself or herself. The process is continued in family counseling as well. It's a multi-generational uh, type of counseling which involves almost assessing all the generations as well as building up the information regarding all generations. So that is why we often refer to development of the genogram. So we'll be discussing that in the techniques, that what is genogram and how it is helpful, which is constructed with the client in order to aid the process of healing. The client puts in efforts to modify the coping strategies, whatever are the patterns in the family, um, which may be the communication patterns, behaving patterns, dealing with the stress, what are the coping strategies of the individual. They are modified. Like, for example, we talked about that there has to be second level of change that we specifically call as second order change, and the client will be able to separate their thoughts from the feelings and themselves from the others, which mean that to some extent they are taught the differentiation of the self as well as accepting the family. Even if there is a problem with a particular family member, accepting them along with their problems, modifying themselves in order to see that how the other people will transform. Thank you folks for watching. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe for more and like and share the video. Click the small bell icon that appears beside the subscription button to receive the notification the minute our video is uploaded. Thank you for watching. Allah Hafiz.